Pope
con
Francis is
profondo
dead.
dolore,
But while some
devo
listen to the news with
annunciare
tears in their
la
eyes,
morte
others'
del
faces grew
nostro
dark with
Santo
dread
Padre
because his death
Francesco.
fulfills a prophecy. An ancient prophecy hidden for centuries in the Vatican's secret archives. The prophecy of Saint Malachi. 900 years ago, as the monk Malachi walked the cobblestone streets of Rome, he was suddenly overtaken by a vision. It was neither a dream nor a hallucination. It was a glimpse into the future of the Catholic Church. In deep trance, Malachi saw the impossible. A long procession of popes marching one after another through the centuries until the very end of days. Malachi recorded his revelations as 112 Latin phrases, each containing a symbol and a warning for every future pope until he reached the last one. Number 112, Peter the Roman. After him, there would be no more popes, only judgment. Today the final name was crossed out for Pope Francis was number 112 counted from Celestine II just as Malachi had foretold. He was the last link in a prophetic chain begun 9 centuries ago. And today that chain is broken. The first 111 mottos are brief, poetic, and densely symbolic, describing each pontiff with astonishing accuracy. Their coat of arms, their origin, their personality, or their fate. But when it reached the final one, the tone changed. It was no longer just a simple phrase. Number 112 is long and frightening. An ominous warning which declares, in the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, Peter the Roman will sit shepherding his flock through numerous tribulations. And when these things have come to pass, the city on the 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. The end. This prophecy leaves us 3 clues about the final pope. 3 specific clear details. That he would be Pope number 112. That he would be named Peter. That his origin would be the city of Rome and that his time would be marked by great struggles and tribulations. Without question, Francis is Pope number 112, counting from Celestine II, exactly as Saint Malachi identified. For centuries, it was believed the final pope would be a man named Peter, born in Rome, an easily recognizable name. But the prophecy, like all ancient revelations, spoke in symbols. And now looking back, everything fits together with unsettling clarity. Francis was born in a modest home in the Flores neighborhood of Buenos Aires, but his heritage isn't Argentinian, it's Italian. His parents were Italian immigrants who left Piedmont in northern Italy, fleeing a country scarred by fascism and crisis, seeking in Argentina a brighter future for their children. In other words, Francis was Roman by lineage, by inheritance, by deep roots connecting him directly to the spiritual heart of the Church. And his given name wasn't Peter as the prophecy had predicted. At birth, he was named Jorge Mario Bergoglio. But when he was chosen as Pope, they asked him what name he would adopt, and he didn't hesitate. He looked directly at the cardinal and replied, Francis. He chose neither an imperial nor doctrinal name. Instead, he chose the saint of the poor and marginalized, Saint Francis of Assisi, the man who abandoned everything to embrace lepers, who walked barefoot and rebuilt the church with nothing but faith and compassion. Yet few recall that this saint's real name was Giovanni di Pietro di Bernardone. Giovanni, son of Peter, a man marked by the most symbolic name of all, Peter. Thus, Pope Francis became precisely the figure the prophecy had described. He was number 112, bearing the name of Peter and the blood of Rome. And the prophecy contained one last revelation. He will shepherd his flock amidst great tribulations. Francis's pontificate was never a reign of peace, nor a time of religious glory. It was precisely what the prophecy foretold, tribulation. His own journey of faith began at a traumatic turning point when as a young man he felt sudden pains in his side. Then came the persistent fever and soon every breath grew harder. The air simply wouldn't reach his lungs. His parents rushed him to the hospital. The doctors studied him carefully with somber expressions. Their diagnosis was brutal. A severe lung infection filled with cysts that threatened his life. The infection had already spread too far, badly damaging his right lung. The doctors had no choice. They had to remove part of that lung. The surgery was risky and the recovery agonizing. It left him bedridden for days. Yet in that cold hospital room, surrounded by sterile tubes, white coats, and deep silence, something happened. For the first time, he came face to face with life's fragility. He understood then that he was not invincible, that his body could fail him, that death could arrive without notice. But he felt no fear, only clarity. While others prayed for his health, he prayed for something deeper to understand the meaning behind his suffering. He didn't ask for relief from pain. Instead, he asked that his pain serve a higher purpose. He was never the same after that. From that moment on, he realized each breath was a miracle. And if God had chosen to let him live, it meant there was still something left for him to do, something important. And only a few months after his recovery, despite his weakened body and limited breathing, he made a choice. His place was with God. From his very first day as Pope, he faced a torrent of criticism. For the first time in history, the Pope wasn't European. And he was a Jesuit. He took charge of a wounded church battered by sexual abuse scandals erupting across every continent. Victims raised their voices, shame multiplied, and the cry for justice could no longer be ignored. Francis never downplayed the gravity of the situation. He publicly asked for forgiveness. He wept openly with victims, and he began a profound reform to end the culture of impunity. But it wasn't easy. Behind every case lay institutional silence, entrenched power structures, and hidden networks resisting any move toward transparency. And on top of that wound came another internal polarization. Internal cracks began to show, deep divisions among cardinals, tensions between progressives and conservatives, and growing suspicion toward the Vatican's power structures. At a press conference during the return flight from his first apostolic trip to Brazil, he remarked, "If someone is gay and accepts the Lord with goodwill, who am I to judge?" The most conservative factions within the church began to perceive him as a threat. They accused him of relativism, ambiguity, of being progressive. Some cardinals even published open letters demanding clarifications. Others accused him without evidence of heresy. They compared him to Paul VI, to John XXIII, even to Luther. Yet he never replied or defended himself. He simply moved forward, serene-faced with steady steps, guided by a conviction far stronger than criticism. For he knew he hadn't come to please anyone, but to serve. He knew all true reform first must hurt before it blossoms. Despite it all, Francis never strayed from his vision. To him, the Church's future lies not in retreat, but in openness. Again and again, he insists on a word that unsettles many. Synodality. It is a church that walks forward together. A church discerning as one. A church listening to the Spirit, not only among those in leadership, but also among ordinary people, among women and lay persons, among those who have never before been heard. He spoke out for a more collaborative church, less steeped in clerical power, one where everyone had a voice, a church open to those who had been cast aside, the migrants, the women, the divorced, those who had been shut out for centuries. Not as a strategy, but as a true conversion. Some accused him of being too lenient. Others said he was too strict. Social media amplified every word and every gesture. Yet, his challenges weren't limited to the Church's internal tensions. His papacy overlapped with one of the most tumultuous periods in modern history. Wars like the one in Ukraine, persecution of Christians in the East, climate crisis, economic turmoil, and a global culture increasingly resistant to faith. In 2020, the pandemic arrived. COVID-19 shut churches, halted pilgrimages, and brought public life to a standstill for millions. Francis stood utterly alone beneath the rain in an empty St. Peter's Square, facing the exposed Eucharist. That haunting image, silent and heartbreaking, captured the condition of a world's wounded soul. On that dark night, when it seemed God himself had hidden away, the Pope raised his voice and declared, "We are not alone." It was among the most powerful moments of his papacy, because at the height of humanity's collective despair, he chose to remain steadfast even as congregations shrank and traditional faith faced questions and doubts from within and outside the Church. In one of his most daring journeys, he traveled to Iraq, a country torn apart by war and extremism, a land where no pope had ventured before. There he met with Muslim and Christian leaders, passionately calling for coexistence stronger than fear. Francis extended his hand to Muslim, Jewish, and Orthodox leaders alike. He met with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, the highest authority in Sunni Islam, in a groundbreaking gesture that sought to heal centuries of tension between Christians and Muslims. During that meeting together they signed a historic document on human fraternity advocating respect, peace, and justice beyond any religious boundary. He also met with Jewish leaders reaffirming common roots and a shared commitment to preserving the memory of the Holocaust. He wept before the walls of Auschwitz and embraced survivors of anti-Semitism. He built bridges with Orthodox Christians as well, particularly with the Patriarch of Constantinople and the Patriarch of Moscow. In Cuba, he took part in a landmark event, the first encounter and embrace between the Roman Pontiff and Patriarch Kirill of Moscow in more than 1,000 years. Yet Francis's papacy was no stroll through a rose garden. From the very start, he understood the 21st century would bring challenges as complex as those of past ages. And yet, Francis led the flock. Through the darkness, he pressed onward. He reformed, denounced injustice, embraced the marginalized, and challenged the powerful. But his leadership was not easy. It was painful, controversial, and relentlessly demanding. From day one, his style provoked resistance. He did not wear the red ceremonial cape. He did not live in the palace. He did not speak in Latin. He did not impose rules. He listened. Because from the very beginning, Francis defined himself as the Pope of Mercy. His episcopal motto said it all. Miserando et elegendo, meaning he looked at him with mercy and chose him. This phrase recalled the moment when Jesus walking by saw Matthew, a sinner, a tax collector, and called him as a disciple. He never justified sin, yet never condemned the sinner. Francis invited believers to leave behind the logic of punishment and enter the logic of the embrace. He sent out missionaries of mercy, priests authorized to forgive even sins usually reserved exclusively for the Pope. He called confessors to act more like fathers and less like judges. He visited prisons, hospitals, and refugee camps. He washed the feet of immigrants, women, and people from other faiths. Every gesture, every word, every silence conveyed the same message. Mercy isn't weakness. It is love's strongest face. And it was this face, the face of Christ himself, that Francis desired to reveal to the world. The prophecy said, Peter the Roman will shepherd his flock through many tribulations. That has been Francis's pontificate. And now, just as it was foretold, it has come to an end. Yet the prophecy ends with these words. And when these events are complete, the city of 7 hills shall be destroyed, and the terrible judge will pass judgment upon his people. The end. That final phrase, brief yet devastating, marks more than the end of a mere list of popes. It marks the close of an era. The city of 7 hills isn't just a metaphor. Revelation 17 also speaks of a city built upon 7 hills. The 7 heads are the 7 hills upon which the woman sits. This city is no mystery. It is Rome. The same Rome Malachi describes as destined for destruction after the reign of the final pope. A city that will witness judgment, purification, and possibly the collapse of an entire age. And according to the prophecy, the city will indeed be destroyed, not necessarily by fire or warfare. The destruction might be something subtler, something spiritual. Indeed, the core message of this prophecy isn't simply destruction. It ends with a warning. The terrible judge will pass judgment upon his people. In other words, there will be a reckoning, not just of the wicked, but of the faithful, too. The prophecy of Saint Malachi isn't merely a warning about the end of days. Although many dismiss it as mere legend, the accuracy with which its predictions have unfolded has silenced even some skeptics. The first pope in the prophecy was Celestine II in 1143. Malachi called him ex castro Tiberis, from the castle of the Tiber. Indeed, Guido da Castello, his actual name, was born in the region surrounding the Tiber River, serving as a cardinal within a church situated near Castel Sant'Angelo, next to the river that runs through Rome. This isn't symbolic interpretation. It's precise location, exact, literal. Centuries later, in modern times, the prophecy continued to prove accurate. John Paul I, elected in 1978, was labeled de meditate luni, from the half-moon. He was elected during a half-moon phase and died just 33 days later, also as a half-moon shown above. His papacy was short, shrouded in mystery, and still today fuels theories surrounding his sudden death. A half-moon indeed, exactly as foretold by the prophecy. To his successor, John Paul II, the prophecy gave the title de labor solis, of the labor of the sun or the eclipse of the sun. Karol Wojtyla was born on the day of a solar eclipse and passed away on April 2, 2005, during another eclipse season. An eclipse occurred on April 8. His entire life was like the restless journey of the sun itself. He traveled more extensively than any pope before him, bringing his message of faith across the globe and becoming a symbol of unity, perseverance, and hope, a tireless sun right until the end. But it doesn't end there. Benedict XVI was called Gloria Olivi, the glory of the olive. Some connected this title to the Benedictine order, symbolically represented by a spiritual olive branch. Others interpreted it through his reserved and peaceful nature, the calm depth of his theology. Undeniably, Benedict chose a papal name that seemed like a deliberate nod towards the prophecy, as if he himself wanted to confirm it. These examples are no mere coincidences. Over and over, the Malachi prophecies have matched historical events, personal biographies, and spiritual symbolism. And thus, what initially appeared to be just poetic verse has now transformed into a truly prophetic record. The last pope would be the final guardian of the Church before the Last Judgment. But Pope Francis's death hasn't just closed a chapter. It has opened a crack, releasing uncertainty that now spreads over the world like a silent shadow. Because if Francis truly was, as many believe, the last pope prophesied, then what comes next is not merely an election, but a leap into the unknown. The question lingering now is, what happens next? Will there be another legitimate pope, or will Peter's throne be occupied by an impostor? For many, the answer is clear. Whoever comes next won't be a shepherd, but rather a wolf in sheep's clothing. Scholars of prophecy and the book of Revelation point inevitably toward one figure. The successor to Francis will be the false prophet, the one mentioned in Revelation chapter 13, who arises looking gentle and devout, yet speaking words like those of a dragon. His mission will not be to save, but to deceive. He had 2 horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. Questions pile up, and among them 2 troubling ideas echo. Warnings we can no longer afford to ignore. If Francis was truly the last pope, who then is next? Could this new leader be the one preparing the way for the Antichrist? The prophecy of Saint Malachi does not stand alone. Scripture itself has been warning for centuries, describing what today seems to unfold right before our eyes. The Apostle Paul warned clearly in his letter to the Thessalonians, before the end comes apostasy and the man of sin will be revealed. Jesus himself in Matthew chapter 24 was even more direct. He said that before the end there would be wars, famines, diseases, and earthquakes. He called these events the beginning of sorrows. You only have to look around. Global pandemics, natural disasters, nations on the brink of war, moral and spiritual corruption spreading like an invisible virus. It's no coincidence. It's a sequence. For years, these verses seemed like distant warnings. Today, after Francis's death, they feel closer than ever. All of this has been written. Faith will be betrayed, and the man of sin will be revealed. The false leader who will present himself as sent from God. Even in the midst of darkness, there is still light. Francis's death may mark the end of an era. But it isn't the end of faith. Because true faith does not die with people. True faith transcends, endures, and grows stronger through trials. And now more than ever, this is a call not to fear, but to awaken, to shake off complacency, to turn back toward God with sincerity, humility, urgency, because we don't know what's coming, but we do know who's ultimately in control. Watch, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour. This is why Francis didn't leave behind a palace or monumental structures. He left something harder to build and more impossible to destroy. A legacy. He was the Pope who broke protocol and opened doors. The one who stepped down from the papal balcony to meet people face to face. He was one who chose listening instead of imposing. He favored integrity over applause and truth over political calculation. His legacy was restoring to the world the most authentic image of Christianity. He tirelessly repeated, "The face of God is found in those who suffer." Francis reformed the Church not merely through decrees, but through a culture of encounter. He championed mercy as the very heart of the Christian message. He embodied dialogue, spoke truthfully, and most challenging of all, did so humbly. In a society quick to condemn, he spoke of second chances. Francis didn't seek a perfect church, but rather one more humane, closer, and more genuine. And through him, the Church dared to rediscover its true essence, Jesus. One thing is certain, Pope Francis has departed. His mission has been fulfilled. Now, after years marked by trials, sacrifice, and courage, he has ascended to meet God. May his soul finally find the peace he so often sought for the world. May heaven welcome him with open arms. Rest in peace, Francis. Amen.